My name is Marina Voss, 29. I tell you that not because I need sympathy, but because context matters. 29 is the age when the world tells you you should know yourself, yet somehow also expects you to let your life be arranged by someone else's fears. 3 weeks before the wedding, in the soft hum of my living room lights, Diane knocked the wind out of that expectation and gave me a choice: call it off, or she'd make my life hell. She didn't bother to be polite. She pushed past the door as if she owned the apartment, as if she owned the right to decide which people were allowed into my life. "We need to talk about this wedding," she said, as if she were announcing a change in the weather. "You're not marrying my daughter. Call it off or I'll make your life hell." You have to understand the exact expression she wore. Satisfied, practiced like a lawyer who's read the right paragraph and is trying to sound merciful. I laughed not because the threat was funny, but because the tone of it was so antiquated, it landed flat. "Excuse me," I said. "There are moments when you're supposed to get angry to storm and fight. I did not." Diane's argument was classic market-tested. Chloe deserves someone who is objectively better, older money, a faster title, a safer resume. She name-dropped Jerome the ex, who'd climbed his career ladder with one very loud, very shiny promotion. "He makes $400,000 a year now," Diane said, as if numbers could translate into moral worth. "You're barely on a path." I sat down like I'd just been invited to a small and curious play. I asked questions that had nothing to do with her performance and everything to do with the truth. Did Chloe know? Had Chloe signed a paper? Would Diane like me to disappear discreetly or theatrically? Diane was delighted. She wanted drama. She wanted humiliation. She wanted to win. Here's the thing Diane didn't know or thought she did. Every single contract for the wedding was in my name. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, months of planning. Invoices, confirmations, all under my email, my credit card, my name on the lines where signatures became commitments. Chloe had been the one who insisted. She trusted my organizational brain with the details. We'd agreed she'd reimburse me from gifts after the ceremony. That was the arrangement. That was the evidence. So when Diane said, "Call it off or I'll make your life hell," I looked at her and said calmly, "Consider it done." I said those words for her benefit. Really, I said them for myself. Night fell. I made a couple of calls. My brother, the one who practices law for a living and has a weakness for drafting theatrical cease and desist emails, was the first. He laughed briefly and then got to work. The rest of the calls were administrative vendors canceling flight agencies rerouting. By midnight, the venue had been notified. The honeymoon flights, which had been booked to Greece under our names, were reassigned to a single person and a single ticket mine. I'd always wanted Bali. I told myself it was coincidence that the universe supplied a warm ocean and a clean slate. I didn't tell Chloe before I started. That's a choice I'll be judged for. The way I justify it to myself is the same way I justify most of my boundaries. When someone brings back up to a fight that should be private, they have already decided how the fight will end. When your partner arrives at the front line with their mother as an ally, what you have left is not a relationship built of mutual defense, but an arrangement built by someone else's fear. I realized that the second Diane stepped over my threshold. Morning after Chloe called hysterical. My mother, bless her, was a paradox of maternal disbelief and protective offense on the phone. "You two talked babe," she told me. "Whatever she said, ignore her. She's difficult." I could hear the relief in Mom's voice, relief that it was drama happening somewhere else. But Chloe's panicked voice overlaid everything. 150 guests, deposits, dreams. "We have 150 people coming," she kept saying, as if repeating it would turn it into a thing that had not been unmade 3 hours earlier. When Chloe arrived at my door with Diane in tow, Diane was wearing that victorious smirk that says, "I control the weather." Chloe's eyes were wet from crying, and when she saw my small packed suitcase by the door, she paused. "Going somewhere?" she asked, and it was the kind of question that carried both accusation and hope. "Bali," I said, and I heard how ordinary the word sounded in my own mouth. "Flights tomorrow. Use the honeymoon tickets if you want. Those were ours. Were. Now they're just mine. Don't worry, I'll send postcards." Diane stepped forward, outrage putting color in her face. "This is ridiculous. You can't just," she began. I didn't even have to raise my voice. "You told me to call it off or you'd ruin my reputation," I said. "So I called it off. I honored your request. Legally, the contracts are in my name. I've documented everything." You drove us here with your threat as leverage. The decision is executed. Chloe looked between us, the daughter in the eye of a storm she'd helped summon. What did you do? She asked, raw. But also, I will not lie hopeful for a defense that I knew she wouldn't mount, because she'd brought the cavalry instead. I was protecting you, Diane said earnestly. He's not good enough for you. That doesn't give you the right to extort my life, I said. I showed Chloe the text where she'd agreed to reimburse me. I showed receipts. I showed the line-by-line plan we'd spent months compiling. Diane went red. Her power comes from performance. It disintegrates in the face of documents and a lawyer brother who knows how to file for defamation faster than someone can fling an insult. They left after a scream that felt like the end of an era. Chloe tried all the stages bargaining tears, anger. But there's a peculiar clarity that comes when the person you love brings a guardian to threaten you instead of standing her ground beside you. That single act rearranged the ledger of trust for me. You can beg me to fight for you, I thought, but I will not fight your mom's war for you. At dusk, I sat by the ocean in Bali with a drink that sweated condensation onto the table and felt a small, unfamiliar peace. The vendors processed refunds, partial less fees, but real money. The venue sent back a portion, the caterer. Another slice, the photographer's deposit returned after negotiation. The total that came back into my account the week after cancellation was a kind of practical consolation, $10, $500, recovered from $16,000. Enough for plane tickets, surf lessons, and a few weeks of not playing small. I learned to surf. My instructor said I had a natural feel for balance and timing. Maybe that's what all of life is, a sequence of finding balance on shifting waves. I practiced smiling without putting my guard down, which is harder than it sounds. Meanwhile, the machine Diane set in motion didn't die quietly. She pretended to call vendors at 3 a.m. to reverse cancellations, phoned my parents to spin a story of theft, and even attempted, ridiculous as it was, to take me to small claims court for emotional damage. My brother put together a crisp response. The judge dismissed her case the minute the texts and contracts were read. Diane was ordered to pay legal fees. Small triumph, admittedly, but legal vindication tastes like paper and relief. I write this from a small bar in Seminyak, where the sunset is scandalously pretty, and the bartender laughs at my Indonesian curses. There's a strange, guilty joy in taking the money we save for a wedding and respending it on a life that was always half mine anyway. There's also a quiet ache for the person Chloe might have been if she'd stood between me and her mother for the life we might have had if loyalty had not been outsourced. If there is a lesson in this first act, it is simple and terrible when someone brings reinforcements to a private fight they have already made their decision about who they are and what they value. I chose not to fight for that. I chose my name, my agency, and the right to wake up and not have my fate auctioned to someone else's fear. And by the way, Diane, if you're reading this, controlling a person's life is not parenting. It's an exchange where you trade their freedom for your comfort. It's a bargain that costs everything. Bali felt like the kind of dream that dissolves when you wake up, except the chaos back home made sure I never forgot it was real. On my second morning, as the sun bled orange across the water, my phone lit up. 67 missed calls from Chloe, 31 from Diane, texts stacked like falling bricks buzzing through every time I turned data on for a few minutes. My brother had told me, document, then block. So I screenshot every thread, every voicemail, every half-written accusation, and then muted them into silence. It was eerie how fast peace returned once I pressed block. No more late night vibrating under my pillow, no more dread every time the screen lit up. The quiet was both a gift and a warning, because I knew Diane wasn't the kind of woman who gave up. The first whisper of her next move came from my cousin Jenna. She sent me a message at midnight Bali time. Girl, you will not believe what I just heard at the coffee shop. Apparently, Diane had been holding court with her circle of friends. Jenna, seated in the corner with her laptop, overheard every word. Diane spun the story like a playwright with a captive audience. I had gotten cold feet. I'd humiliated her daughter. Chloe was a victim of my selfishness. But then Chloe herself had stormed into the cafe. Mom, we need to talk now, Jenna recalled her saying, sharp enough that the room went silent. Not here, Diane had hissed, embarrassed. You told people I called it off, Chloe said, voice breaking. After what you did, Jenna said even Diane's closest friends gasped. And then the truth slipped out in the one sentence Diane could never reel back. I threatened her. I was protecting you. The cafe went dead silent. Someone muttered, that's not protecting, that's controlling. Jenna said Chloe cried in front of everyone. Diane stormed out. For the first time, Diane didn't look like the all-powerful matriarch. She looked like someone exposed. Meanwhile, on my side of the ocean, I was learning how to stand on a surfboard. My instructor, a man with salt-stiff hair and a grin too wide for the ocean to contain, clapped when I managed to ride one small wave without collapsing. "Natural balance," he said. I thought about how strange it was. Diane tried to knock me off balance, and yet here I was, riding a tide she never saw coming. But even in paradise, you can feel the tug of the past. Because Chloe's texts before I blocked her hadn't just been anger. They had been fractured things, rage one minute, desperate apologies the next. "Please, babe, let's talk. She doesn't speak for me. How could you cancel without me? We can fix this. I still love you." Each message had been a thread, trying to stitch something already torn apart. Blocking her had been an act of mercy, as much as self-preservation. The practical side of me, the Marina who balanced budgets and remembered deadlines, stayed busy with the math of escape. I watched as the refunds began trickling back into my account, $4,200 from the venue, $3,500 from catering, smaller amounts from flowers and photography. A total of $10,500 returned money that once stood for vows and gifts now became flight tickets, surf lessons, and cocktails. I told myself that numbers didn't lie, that they were proof I hadn't wasted years I'd invested, and now I was collecting what could be salvaged. But in the quiet hours staring at the ceiling fan in my rented bungalow, I wondered if the true refund was not the money, but the realization I had been engaged to someone who would let her mother fight her battles. Then came the second whisper of escalation. The venue manager called me at 3 a.m. Bali time. His voice was apologetic, but suspicious. "Ms. Voss, just confirming you wanted to reverse the cancellation." What I sat up in bed, heart pounding. "Absolutely not." "Well," he said, hesitating, "someone called earlier today claiming to be you." The voice sounded older, different. "Of course, Diane." I pinched my temples. "Please note on file, no changes accepted, unless they come directly from my email. With my signature. Document this, please." "It's already done," he said. "Also, we've rebooked your date to a corporate client. Even if you wanted it back, it's gone." The irony was too sharp to miss. Diane had tried to drag me back into the cage, and in doing so had locked the door behind her daughter instead. Later that week, another call came, this time from my mother. "Sweetheart," she said, voice tight. "Diane came to our house." What did she want now? To warn us you're having a breakdown, that you're unstable, that you stole Chloe's money. I closed my eyes. "And you?" "We told her to leave before we called the police. And your father said if she spread another lie, he'd testify in court himself." Even through the phone, I could hear my father's uncharacteristic fury. Diane had overstepped, and my family, who rarely interfered, had finally seen it. The quiet of Bali pressed in again. The sunsets, the music, the drinks, all should have drowned out the noise. But a line from Chloe's last text haunted me. "Maybe you should come home so we can prove our love is stronger than my mom's interference." The tragic part. She believed it. She thought love was about proving, about surviving sabotage. But I didn't want a love that needed proof. I wanted a love that didn't bring backup to the battle. I closed my phone. The bartender taught me a new curse in Indonesian. I laughed. But inside I could feel the storm building. Diane wasn't done. Diane's energy was volcanic. When blocked in one direction, she simply erupted in another, if the wedding couldn't be salvaged by smooth persuasion or subtle guilt. She turned to lies dressed up as facts. The first real strike landed while I was still in Bali. My brother called, his voice carrying that strange mix of annoyance and amusement that only lawyers can manage. "You'll never believe what she just filed," he said. I sat up straighter on the hammock. "Don't tell me." "Oh, but I must. Diane is suing you. Small claims court. Emotional damages and theft of wedding funds." For a second I actually laughed. The sound startled a gecko that darted across the wall. "She's suing me for canceling my own wedding. She claims you stole Chloe's money." He rustled papers. "Only problem is, every contract was in your name, and Chloe's texts make it very clear she agreed to pay you back after the gifts came in. You know what that's called in court? Evidence." "Exactly. Sit tight. This one's going to get dismissed faster than she can spell emotional damage." In parallel, Diane was still trying to reassemble the wedding like a child desperate to glue back broken glass. She called the florist pretending to be me. She sent emails from an account called marina.voss.events@gmail.com as if no one would notice the fake. Vendors forwarded me the attempts laughing. She sounded like a middle-aged woman pretending to be a 29-year-old bride, the photographer wrote. Didn't even get your fiancé's name right. If it hadn't been my life, it might have been comedy. But then came the quieter, more insidious blow, Jerome. Yes, Jerome. The ex. The man Chloe swore she'd never look at again. Suddenly he was everywhere, buying her dinner, escorting her to brunch, even showing up at her hair appointment. Diane had pulled him out like an old playing card, hoping money and persistence would overwrite memory. Jenna texted me again. He's parading around like her savior. He told everyone at the cafe he offered to pay for the wedding if Chloe gave him another chance. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. It wasn't heartbreak, not exactly. It was exhaustion. Because Jerome was the embodiment of everything Diane wanted, wealth, appearance, status. And Chloe, caught between loyalty and pressure, was wobbling. I couldn't stop the thought that knifed in. If she says yes, she'll finally be the daughter Diane always wanted, and I'll finally be the villain Diane always needed. The court date came quickly, and though I stayed in Bali, my brother kept me updated blow by blow. The judge read through the file with something close to exasperation. Diane spoke of betrayal, humiliation, how I had sabotaged her daughter's future. My brother presented texts, contracts, bank statements. Then came the judge's ruling, sharp as a gavel strike. No grounds for emotional damage when the defendant has proof the plaintiff threatened her. No theft when contracts were in the defendant's name. Plaintiff's own daughter's messages show agreement to repay after the wedding. Case dismissed. Plaintiff will cover the defendant's legal fees of $1,500. My brother called me that night. The judge actually rolled their eyes at her. Rolled their eyes. I poured another drink on the beach, the ice clinking like punctuation. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel something that had been buried under adrenaline vindication. But vindication has a way of curdling. 2 nights later, my friend Kevin texted, saw Chloe at dinner with Jerome. The next day, brunch. Same guy, same ring on her finger. My ring. The surf, once my refuge, turned into punishment. I kept falling, crashing into waves, the board slipping away. My instructor said balance comes when you stop fighting the ocean. But how do you stop fighting when your heart is still swinging at ghosts? I did the pettiest thing I've done in years. I opened my phone, uploaded every photo from Bali surfing, cooking classes, sunset hikes, and captioned them. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is dodging a bullet. Thanks, Diane. Within minutes, Chloe called me from an unknown number, her voice cracked with fury. How dare you? How dare I would enjoy my life? You're rubbing it in. Rubbing what in? You seem to be doing fine with Jerome. I heard about the dinners, the brunches, the ring. That's not, he was just looking at it in the barber shop. Sure, Chloe. Friends always slip engagement rings onto each other's hands for fun. She didn't respond. The silence said more than her words ever could. And then came the line that gutted me, not because it was cruel, but because it was so heartbreakingly honest. Because at least he fights for me, she whispered. I closed my eyes. The truth settled like lead. No, Chloe. He waited until you were vulnerable and swooped in. I fought for 4 years. I just refused to fight your mother too. That was the moment the storm broke. Not from Diane, not from Chloe, not even from Jerome, but inside me. Because for the first time I believed it fully, I wasn't just dodging a bullet. I was stepping out of a war I never signed up for. And somehow that knowledge was more terrifying than Diane's threats had ever been. The human heart has a strange way of chasing both vindication and ruin at the same time. By the time Jerome's reappearance had cemented itself into Chloe's orbit, my Bali nights were split between laughter with strangers and staring at the ceiling, with that one poisonous question in my mind. Did I really lose her, or did she give herself away? I scrolled through Chloe's old messages when I shouldn't have. I love you more than I can say. You're the safest place I've ever had. The contrast to her current silence was whiplash. That's when my petty streak kicked in. I posted another round of photos, me grinning, with a surfboard tucked under my arm. The cooking class where the instructor had guided my hands through slicing ginger, the sunrise hike that painted the whole island in liquid gold. Caption freedom looks better when it costs you nothing you should have kept. The likes rolled in. The messages, too. Friends applauded. Strangers followed. Diane must have seen it because Chloe called again, her voice trembling with rage. You're humiliating me. No, Chloe. I'm just documenting my life. The humiliation part, that's on your mom. Her breath hitched. You're rubbing it in my face. I'm living. That's not the same as rubbing anything in. Besides brunch with Jerome. The ring. That's not humiliation. It's complicated, she whispered. Of course it was. Everything was complicated when you never cut the strings tied to your wrists. And then, almost as if scripted, Jerome's mask slipped. Kevin, my perpetually observant friend, texted me one night. Guess who I just saw at the bar, Jerome? Flirting with some girl who couldn't have been older than 22. Hand on her waist, whispering in her ear. Another friend confirmed it 2 days later. He was on his phone during dinner with Chloe. I swear I saw messages popping up. Looked like Instagram handles. Not a great sign. And then the kicker, my barber of all people sent me a photo of Chloe and Jerome sitting together in the waiting area. Chloe was wearing my ring. Jerome was leaning back smirking like he'd just claimed a prize. It felt like swallowing glass. Not because I wanted Chloe back, but because the image was obscene. My promises, my love, my carefully built life reduced to an accessory in someone else's theater. I couldn't stop myself. I answered one of Chloe's late-night calls. Her voice was wet with tears. "You were right," she whispered. "About him. About everything." "Then why are you still there?" "Because at least he fights for me." That line again piercing deeper than the first time. I sat on the balcony moonlight, carving silver into the waves, and forced myself to say it. "Chloe, I fought for you for 4 years. I built a life for us. The only thing I refused to fight was your mother. If that disqualifies me, then you never wanted me. You wanted a soldier." The silence between us was a canyon. Days blurred. Diane tried again, of course. She called from Chloe's phone, her voice dripping venom. "You ruined everything," she snapped. I leaned back, swirling the drink in my glass. "Diane, how wonderful to hear from you. Did you get the court papers yet?" "You little..." "Careful. Harassment is still a crime. And my brother's recording this call." "You're lying." "No, she's not came." My brother's voice firm, steady, already on the line. "Mrs. Hart, please stop contacting my client." Click, silence. For the first time, I felt her power weaken in my bones. The irony. While Diane's empire crumbled, my own world stretched wider. My boss emailed me out of the blue. "We're impressed. You handled the Peterson merger remotely. You're getting a raise. $75,000. Still not Jerome money, but money earned on my terms, not stolen through manipulation." And yet in quiet moments, I admitted to myself I didn't feel victorious. Not fully. Because vindication isn't love. Petty wins don't heal betrayals. And watching Chloe drift further into her mother's orbit while pretending Jerome was a safety net that wasn't closure. That was rot. I began to understand something. No court, no paycheck, no Bali sunset could explain. Sometimes walking away isn't the hard part. It's convincing yourself not to look back. Some endings don't happen behind closed doors. They happen under fluorescent lights with strangers pushing grocery carts and pretending not to watch. It was a Tuesday evening when I rolled my cart into the cereal aisle and nearly collided with Chloe and Diane. Chloe's eyes darted away the second they met mine. Diane, though. She locked on like a hawk spotting prey. "You destroyed my family," she shouted loud enough that a mother 2 rows down stopped mid-reach for a box of Cheerios. I rested my hand on the cart handle, pulse steady. "Diane, you did that yourself. I just refused to play along." Her face turned crimson. "My daughter is heartbroken. Your daughter is standing right here." I cut in my voice, calm but cutting. Maybe talk to her instead of at her for once. For a moment, silence blanketed the aisle. Chloe's lips trembled. She stepped forward, voice shaking but firm. "Mom, stop. You've done enough." Diane spun toward her, betrayal flashing like a wound. "I was protecting you." "No," Chloe said, her tears breaking free. "You were protecting yourself. Your pride, your control. And I'm the one who paid for it." The words sliced through the air, undeniable. Strangers froze. Even the store's background music seemed to fade. Diane's mouth opened, but no sound came. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked speechless. Chloe turned to me. Her voice softer now, almost childlike. "I'm sorry. For everything. You deserve better." I held her gaze, my chest tight with memories, the promises, the laughter, the nights we planned our future. But I didn't step forward. I didn't comfort her. Some apologies arrive too late, and love without boundaries is just slow destruction. "You're right," I said simply. "I did deserve better." She nodded, a single tear streaking her cheek, and walked away. Left her mother standing there clutching a box of Captain Crunch like it was a weapon. Diane tried to rally. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "She was the best thing in your pathetic life." I almost laughed. Maybe, but at least my life is mine. I wheeled my cart to the register, my hands steady, my breath even. Behind me, the aisle buzzed with whispers. At checkout, the cashier, a teenager with earbuds dangling around his neck, slipped a candy bar into my bag. He grinned sheepishly. That was like a movie. I smiled back, a real one this time. Yeah, I said. It kind of was. Life, meanwhile, moved in directions Diane could never control. My boss called me into his office the next week, papers spread on the desk. So let me get this straight, he said. While in Bali, you managed a merger, documented extortion, canceled a wedding, and still hit every deadline. Yes, I said, waiting for the sting. He leaned back impressed. HR wants to fast-track you for promotion. We need people who can handle pressure. I left his office dazed, the weight of irony almost comical. Diane had tried to bury me, and in doing so had handed me the shovel to dig upward. But promotions and pay raises don't quiet the heart completely. Nights were still filled with shadows of Chloe's face, her trembling voice, her admission in the cereal aisle. Love doesn't dissolve just because it's poisoned. It lingers like smoke in the curtains. Still, every time I felt the ache, I reminded myself of the simple truth Chloe had brought back up into a private war. She had handed me to her mother instead of standing beside me. That was the wound that could never be stitched. Closure didn't come as triumph. It came as acceptance, the realization that survival sometimes looks like walking away, not winning. And as I lay in bed that night, the candy bar wrapper crinkling on my nightstand, I thought maybe the real story isn't about losing Chloe. Maybe it's about finally choosing me. The final chapter of Diane's storm didn't end with me. It ended the way most of her plans did, in the collapse of her own illusions. News trickled across oceans like gossip carried on the tide. Jerome hadn't changed. Not even a little. He was caught texting an Instagram model while sitting at dinner with Chloe at the very restaurant where she and I had our first date. The cruelty of that symmetry almost made me laugh. Almost. Chloe called me at 2 a.m, her voice shredded. You were right about everything, she sobbed. I pressed the phone closer, listening but not speaking. Okay, she whispered after a long pause. That's it. Just okay. What do you want me to say, Chloe? My voice was quiet, not cruel, but firm. That I still love you. That we can fix this. We can't. Not because of Jerome, not even because of Diane, but because when the storm came, you brought your mother as backup instead of standing with me. Silence. Then the faint sound of her crying again. I see it now. I was wrong. Good, I said gently. Growth is important. You're really done. I was done the night your mother walked into my apartment, but I needed time to believe it. The line stayed open for a moment longer, her breath hitching. Then the call ended. Diane predictably refused to vanish quietly. She called my workplace, spinning a tale about my supposed instability, how I'd abandoned responsibilities. HR pulled me into a meeting, concern etched on their faces. I laid everything out, the threats, the court dismissal, the screenshots. My boss leaned back, lips twitching as if he were suppressing laughter. So let me summarize, he said. You managed a merger from Bali while navigating extortion, a canceled wedding, and a lawsuit, and still delivered on time. Yes. He exchanged a glance with HR, then nodded. We need people who can handle pressure. Congratulations, Marina. Promotion track begins now. It was almost absurd. Diane had tried to shatter me. Instead, she'd handed me the proof I needed to climb higher. But the truest victory wasn't professional. It was personal. One ordinary Saturday, I found myself at a grocery store again. This time, the aisle was quiet, unremarkable, no confrontations. I pushed my cart past the cereal boxes and realized with a start that I wasn't scanning for Diane's shadow anymore. I wasn't bracing for Chloe's voice. My life was mine again, entirely. Later that evening, I met friends for axe throwing. Kevin, his girlfriend, and a few new faces. Laughter ricocheted off the walls, the thunk of axes sinking into wood, punctuating every joke. Someone offered to introduce me to their friend who already knows your whole story and thinks you're iconic. I smiled, unsure if I was ready, but also aware for the first time I didn't feel broken, just open. As for Diane, her empire of control crumbled. Her friends stopped liking her posts. Whispers labeled her that desperate woman in Pilates class. The stage she once commanded grew emptier by the day. Chloe posted something online about learning to stand on her own, about toxic family ties. Maybe she'll get there, maybe she won't. But that's her journey, not mine. Mine is simpler, 10 grand in refunds turned into a solo adventure fund, a promotion, new skills, and a story worth telling. I ended that night with a quiet ritual. Sat on my balcony, city lights flickering below, and raised a glass, not to Diane, not to Chloe, but to myself. To choosing peace over battle, truth over manipulation, freedom over proof. Some people believe closure comes from reconciliation. I think closure is just a decision to stop looking back. And so I did. The wedding would have been today. Instead, I was laughing with friends, an axe in my hand, the future wide open. Maybe tomorrow I'll plan another trip. Japan, perhaps. For now, I'm content with the lesson carved into my bones. Sometimes